production. So
Yeah. And so do you change it up every year on how you put it together?
no, it's the same thing. It's just new data. And then sometimes looking at different factors. Like the last thing I did was look at how even strength, you can use even strength production to kind of project what their power play scoring can be even. And so I hadn't used those factors before, so I tightened that up last year. So it's just more looking for new things that'll kind of strengthen the correlation, like looking for factors that actually affect. I played around with it a lot. I tried height, I remember back in the day, and weight and things, but those things were like non-factors.
Yeah. And do you do the same for goalies? You got different stats
I
that you do
haven't
for
figured
goalies?
out anything yet for goaltenders on a good way to do it. I know Byron Bader on Twitter, for those who follow, has come up with kind of a new method. So for them, I use I have my draft pick value chart that kind of ranks what an average overall pick would be, and I just kind of go based off that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's too many unknowns. I'm not quite sure what's the best way to rank goalies yet.
Yeah. Well, when you find out, I mean, let us all know, because
Yeah.
not many GMs in the league have quite figured it out yet. I mean, and this is, it's a unique year, right? We've got two goalies that could easily go top round this year. So
Yeah.
it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see. Okay, so
I
you know
would,
what? I mean, you brought up Bader. Who are some of the influences for you? I mean, you mentioned Low Tide. Everybody, if you're into any type of analytics, Low Tide, of course, is one of the guys locally. But who else would you follow? And I know you merged some of the draft rankings. Like, who do you get
yeah,
it from?
yeah. I use, like, I think I got over 25 different draft rankings I'm using this year. So there's a whole lot of them. I know Brandon Holmes, who you had last week. He does a great work out there.
Yeah, he was a fun
Sean,
guest to have. He was really good. Yeah.
yeah, Sean Patrick Ryan, especially for on anything from the OHL,
Yeah,
especially.
absolutely.
If there's a guy he's really sold on, say like Robert Thomas in his draft year, he's typically right about those guys, I find.
Yeah.
So I find if my draft rankings don't go along with them for OHL guys, I'm concerned a little, actually.
Yeah, let's not let that get to his head. But he's actually got Sean on next week to talk some
I
hockey.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got that. Anybody? What about is there a guy in the WHL that you look to?
There's different guys. Cam Robinson out of I'm not sure where he's at anymore. He used to be with Dauber Prospects, and then he's moved on. But he's out of Vancouver, and he does good work. Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there there's guys from Europe that I get their draft rankings from, and things like that. So they're all over the place.
Now you said that you before we came on air, you said next week you're releasing your list. Have you started your list already?
Oh yeah, it started. I'm just waiting basically on some rankings to be finalized. The last one's always Bob McKenzie. So as soon as his is done, I can like input those numbers into my draft model, and then it's done with. But looking at the numbers, like I've done this enough where I'm pretty sure my top 8 guys are set, and there won't be any movement out of them. I just don't think the rankings are going to change enough to affect it. So it's kind of already set in order. It's just a matter of finalizing the numbers, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I get that, and like there's I didn't realize McKenzie. I haven't looked yet, but I didn't realize McKenzie hasn't put his out yet. I mean, we're like only 10 days away, right? Like
yeah, McKenzie typically puts his out the Monday before the draft, so 4 days before.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't I don't follow him as much. Typically, I follow the guys at the Athletic, Pronman and Wheeler, and which they usually do a little bit early. Low tide's good, and also the Oil Night, of course. Had the guys from Draft Pro Hockey as well. One of the guys from there on, and there's no shortage of really good analysts out there. So it's kind of, I do find it kind of neat that you've found a different route to get your list, right?
Yeah.
So right now, of course, pre Bob McKenzie, who do you got at number one?
Number one is Eklund.
Oh, really?
My number one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Which that surprises me a little bit because I seem to see Power's name at number one most often, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just some type of bias that I'm seeing because I'm looking for it.
Out of mine, Power, like Eklund, Power, and Beniers are the top three, and they're quite close between the scouting community. Those are the three guys. And there's a difference of opinions with them. So, but Power's the one I hear the most in like kind of the mainstream media. So his name's out there the most, but there's a lot of scouts that have other people, and that's why you hear like Buffalo's been. The rumors more that they're going for Eklund or might want to move down. That's what I've heard.
Yeah. I haven't heard. I haven't heard any rumors around that. I in fact, they were releasing some of the interviews this week, right? NHL was. Did you watch any of them?
No, I haven't watched any.
No, I know. I know only of the one, which is Power, who said he would be happy to go to Buffalo. But my understanding is his intention, unless if that's changed in the past week, is to go and play NCAA. In the past, have you been would you say you're surprised at the route the GMs go based on what you put together, or is it usually pretty accurate to how you think they'll go?
Usually the top end's fairly close, I'd say, and then it kind of starts to vary. Last year was actually kind of surprising. It was a little more all over the place a little bit. There's some guys that were taken the first round that a lot of scouts were surprised by. So it's interesting. This year's going to be all over the map. So
yeah, it's actually there's a lot of people out there that are saying they're not looking forward to the draft this year. Personally, I love the fact that it's all over the place. I mean, the top five has differences in everybody's top list, right? Like there's, as you said, you got Eklund. I mean, you come to your list by a different route, but I've seen Power at one. I've seen Eklund. I've seen, I've seen, of course, you see Hughes up there a fair bit. We do have one question. Are any goalies going to be available at 19? What's your thought there? I think, of course, although I've had this argument on Twitter, there's a lot of people who think Cossa is going to go top 15. I think he'll be available when the Oilers pick. But your thought?
He's sitting right now at 19 on my ranking. So he's right there at where the Oilers are. So I think it all depends. He could be snatched up. There's a team that really wants a goalie. So it depends. I think the Swede will be gone. I think Wallstedt will be gone.
Yeah, I would take him in the top 15 for sure. Yeah. And then Cossa not far behind. I heard a stat that it's been a number of years since two goalies were taken in the first round, but
it's been a while. I remember back when Price and Rask went in the first round.
What's the little one thing?
That year was a debate over who was better.
There we go. That's my youngest ever podcast guest, by the way. No, that's cool. Yeah, it's been we'll talk some Oilers, of course, before we finish up today. But They just and of course you don't do the goaltending stats, but if you have him at 19, I think, in fact, I think I've seen him at 19, in or around 19, 17 to around 21, I think is where I've seen him. He's a great big goalie. You're based in the Edmonton region. Have you had a chance to watch him play?
Just on TV, just online and stuff this year.
Yeah.
Not too much. Yeah, he put fantastic.
He's a huge goalie, right?
Yeah.
He's huge. He's mobile. A lot of confidence. I think he was something like 17-1 this year. In the
941 percentage or something, crazy like that.
Yeah, and I saw somebody post his numbers up against Price and Fleury.
Yeah,
and they were pretty damn close. So to believe like he's going to go, 19 is a lot to say about how good Wallstedt is as well, right? Like if because pretty much I've not seen him surpass Wallstedt on any listings, but I've never really watched Wallstedt, to be honest.
Yeah, with teams playing less games this year and stuff, I think scouts will have to rely more on like reputation and previous years and things like that. There's OHL players in the draft that have not played a game this year, so, and they're getting drafted, so it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like it is. It's insane to think that there's guys that will have really not played for a whole year, that people are going to gamble on potentially in the first round. Because, and I've asked every guest this because I'm based in Halifax now, where do you have Zachary Leroux on your list?
He sits at 21 at the moment.
21. Okay.
Yeah.
He's dropped considerably for most, in terms of where he's been. I've seen him early on. I saw him top 15. And then now I've seen him in the later rounds and some even outside of the first round. Most of that's not based on analytics, though, so it's hard to quantify the reasons. And the reasons are, he's a bit of a troublemaker. He's he got suspended this year for spitting on a guy, so but he's got great hands. He's fun to watch. He's a hell of a player. If he can interview well, he'll be taken high in the draft, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, teams like that.
We do have some comments, hopefully in the upcoming season, if the Oil make it, that Tinker Tips, as he's calling him, doesn't run up the minutes on his top horses in the barn. That could be meant a number of different ways. So again, sorry, what year did you start doing this? Was 20?
Well, the blog started back in 2015. 2016 was the first time I did a draft model. I've done rankings previous to that. Most of them I can't find anymore. They were posted on Low Tide back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Back in
Now,
I remember as far as 2007.
Oh yeah. And have you had a chance to talk to Low Tide and to have conversations with these guys that you do the prospects with?
I did his show a couple times, like years ago, back before he was the only on like on the weekends. He was like on Saturday or something. That's back when I did the show, kind of.
Yeah, right on. One of the things I love about Low Tide is that he's a community supporter, and he seeks out folks like yourself and that are around the Oilers, and in that bubble of blogs and prospect analysis and that, and he'll have people on his show, and there's so many. I keep watching and keep tabs on what's going around in the league, and I'm trying to follow other podcasts, right? Because of whether it's just to have them on as guests. I will say this 100% is there is not a team in the league, even Toronto or Montreal, that have the I would say the participation that Oilers fans participate in the analysis and the the writing and the media around the team that's not paid.
Yeah.
This is I'm one of 100 podcasts. I think I might, maybe it's more now. There seems to be a new one every week.
Yeah.
And it's just outstanding. I'm you know what, I'm all for it. I did. I had people join me a little while back and showed them how to podcast, knowing full well that some of them would be doing Oilers podcasts at some point.
Yeah.
So you know what, I think it's great. It's outstanding, and what you're doing is pretty outstanding too. So let's talk about the top prospects. Maybe let us know, what's your top 5 right now, if you got it as you see it so far,
for the Oilers or the draft?
For the draft.
For the draft, well, I got a top 6. Like there's a top 6 tier of Eklund, Power, Beniers, Clark, Hughes, and Gunther. Those are the top 6.
In that order?
We'll see how it plays out, but it's some similar to that order. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, so Eklund, Beniers, Gunther, Power, Hughes, and there was one more, right?
Brant Clark.
Oh, Clark. Yep. Okay. And so you haven't finalized yet what order you think they're in?
No, I haven't finalized, but those will be the 6 guys for sure.
Yeah. And so your final, you said, is coming out. When do you expect it?
Probably a week from now.
Okay.
It'll be a couple days before the draft. Yeah.
Now explain to everybody who's watching, or who's watching, listening, etc. When they get your released numbers, like, how does it work out? Like, there's different numbers that you put in there. What are all of these numbers that you've got in there?
Well, I guess we could start by just talking about the draft pick value chart that I kind of created. So that one's based off of historical data. So currently it's based off of 1998 to 2012 draft choices. So I got to update it with a couple more years, but I leave it like that so that players hit their prime at least, so I can have like a peak year.
Yeah. So if, just for everybody that's watching or listening, you can find out. You can go to bluebulletreport.com. And right now, the only thing that you have on there is the 2020. Well, not the only thing. There's lots on there, but you've got the 2020 NHL draft rankings. And if you can hit continue reading on that, you can get your methodology is in there, as well as the draft pick value chart. So, okay, so there's the draft pick value chart. What does that mean to us?
Well, that means to us, so this is kind of like a number to kind of give a value of a player. So most value charts that I had seen previous to me creating this one were based on games played. And I always had an issue with that, because a game's played between Connor McDavid and say Zach Cassian, they're 2 completely games, So I had done a lot of research on points per game of draft picks and things like that. So I incorporated that into my value chart. So a first overall pick is expected to play X amount of games and have X amount of points per game on average. And so from there, I can kind of determine a score for a player. And so I set it so that a first overall pick is the score of 100. And then a second overall pick is a score of 87.3. So the value of a second overall pick is 87% of a first overall pick. It's kind of like percentiles almost.
Yep.
And then it just goes down from there.
Now, of course, you're going to have to. Well, I guess you won't have to change it. You just have to change how you group it, right? With the, but the numbers will stay the same, I suppose. Yeah, now, does it work on a bell curve? Does it end up going normalized like that?
I think in my draft rankings, I have a little graph of the chart, and it looks like it looks kind of like going down the Sky Screamers, kind of how the value in the draft.
Yeah, that's a good Edmonton reference for anybody out there right now.
Yeah, it's just a steep drop. All the value in the draft is at the top end of the draft. Like if you add up the value of the 4th, 5th, and 6th and 7th round of the draft, that equals the first overall pick.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
and that bears true over all of the data that you've done, like in terms of from what year? Sorry, 1998 to 2012 so far.
Yeah. So basically, would you rather have picks like 128 down, or would you have the number 1 pick?
Yeah.
So, and it turns out the number 1 pick's more valuable than 100 and some picks. So
those are those like that's a ratio basically, right? Like if you've got like let's take at 113 is at 1, so that's like 1% of 1 to 100, right? Versus is that direct ratio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd need 100. You'd need 113 picks to kind of make up your value. Yeah.
And so like a draft like this year, where I don't think it has what I would consider an average 1st or 2nd overall pick. I don't think there is one in this draft. So that's why you see everybody's clumped together at the top, is this draft just doesn't have the high end top pick. That's why you haven't heard any hype like the years where like there's a Tavares or a Hall versus Sagan or a McKinnon, or that's why there's no real hype to this draft. It lacks the top end guys.
Interesting. And now, so do you think like a draft like this will completely blow apart your value? Like for, like, is it like a one-off type of year then, or will it, or will you think it stay true?
Each year is kind of relative to that year.
Yeah.
Because of that, I'm assuming each year's an average year.
Yeah.
It's an assumption. So yeah, I have nothing to prove that there isn't a top 2 pick, so I can't go based off of that, but that's just my belief.
Yeah.
So Eklund's value or power will have a higher score than maybe what their true value is if they were in a stronger draft here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, and so you in your draft pick value chart, you value forwards higher than D-men.
Predominantly, yeah, and the main reason for that is defenseman after, I can't remember now off the top of my head, but after about 20th overall, defensemen play a lot less games than forwards, like about 15% less. So they take longer to get to the NHL. The guys picked in the top 20 for defensemen usually end up playing about the same amount of games as their forward counterparts and picked in the top 20. But after that, forwards tend to always play more games. So to me, that's why they have more value. So you get more games out of them.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, like, so fill me in now. Like, when you've done this, and you do this just sort of as a labor of love, I assume.
Yeah.
Like, what, put yourself into the GM seat for a bit, right? Like, and we might as well talk about this Duncan Keith trade because it's gonna come up, right? There's was it a 3rd rounder thrown in there, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If we go, 3rd round is probably over 90th pick, I guess. So it would be 96th in there, or no, it would be between 60 and 90.
Yeah, 65.
Yeah. So, that's not, I mean, on your value chart, right? Like that's, you're still +1 in those, right?
Yeah.
Like when if you're trading picks, right? Is there kind of like an area where you're kind of just based on what you've seen, like would you give away a 3rd rounder or
just to give some numbers, like for picks taken between 31 and 71, 63% of them play less than 100 games. For players picked 72 to 106, that goes up to 73%. So you're most likely not to get anybody in the 3rd round. after about the 75th pick or so, the median pick is of, if you took the median pick of like the 75th or the 76th or the 77th pick and onward, it's 0 games played. Like your most likely scenario is to get somebody that's never going to play.
So in the case of the Oilers, who you expect will make the playoffs over the next couple of years, and the pick's conditional, I'm not sure what the conditions were on it. You're really talking like a throwaway player, right? Throwaway pick.
It's typically they're not going to hit. So like players drafted between 31 and 71st. What is it? 15% of them end up having 0.40 points per game or more for forwards. So 85% of them are bottom 6 guys or worse, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the second round. Like in the second round, you should expect not to really get anybody of value.
Yeah.
Typically what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that, it's true. You get the odd player, right, that you've,
every so many years.
Yeah. Or you could be fully stacked with first overalls like the Oilers have been on occasion. Sadly. Okay. So let me ask you what, when you're doing prospects, but obviously you're an analytics kind of guy. You look at the analytics of things when it comes to hockey. I assume it's not just related to prospects. What is your both from a looking at the trade perspective and from an analytics perspective? What's your view of this Duncan Keith trade?
It's one of those trades where you're like, if you look at it through rose-colored glasses, maybe it's okay. But yeah, I'm concerned with the trade. Just the age curve. His game could completely fall off the map at any point. He's at that age, and
some would say he's fallen off the map already. Yeah, but there are potential excuses for that. I'll give him that.
Yeah. Well, for sure, he's a poor first line defenseman. We know for sure from the analytics. What we don't know is how he'll do on the second or third, though he didn't do very well last year against top 6 forwards. So I don't even know if he can do the second pairing role like the Oilers are hoping for. He might be more like your third pair, he's more maybe on Chris Russell's level by now. Who knows? Because he hasn't played in a sheltered role. We'll have to see. But.
Yeah. Do you like it?
No, not really. Then there's the cap hit on top of that. And yeah. So.
Yeah.
No, not too many positives for me. It's just you hope it turns out, but I don't know. We've seen enough of that kind of hope and prayer kind of thing. Doesn't really work usually.
Hope and prayer is not a really good way to run a hockey team. You know what, I'm going to for myself in terms of the trade, I'm going to reserve judgment till we see it, which I usually do. I like to see a player play. There are reasons why Keith's numbers dropped off. I'll give him that. Right, like he certainly wasn't playing with a good D partner, and maybe that'll change. He's and it's funny because I was getting upset earlier on in the playoffs that the Oilers didn't have like a Corey Perry type of player, right? Or a Patty Maroon, like these guys that are next to nothing, cost next to nothing, and seemingly have this unbelievable ability to get their team to the is there a more talked about player than Corey Perry for his value, right? I mean, I hate Corey Perry as much as any Oilers fan. But does Duncan Keith, is it the experience or the sandpaper that you want? Is my question, and that seemingly seems to be the reason for the Duncan Keith trade is the experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But does he bring anything remotely close to what a Corey Perry or a Pat Maroon bring to a team that we're not currently getting out of Cassian?
Yeah, or it's going to be more like the Andrew Ference or an Adam Oates kind of situation where you're getting them a little too late.
Yeah, and then take that and go a little bit further. Parise, right,
Oh
and
yeah,
Suter. Yeah,
that's
I
high
would
out there.
I would say I've been a Ken Holland fan for the most part. Like there's a lot of things that I like about him that I think analytics folks wouldn't like about him, but I here's a guy that and all respect to you, Ken, if you ever happen upon my podcast, but doubtful you will. Here's a guy that's retirement age, right? Like
Yeah,
he's long in the tooth. He's old, right? He's an old guy. Comes to Edmonton, kind of. I would say it's his swan song, right? Like this is the end of his career as a GM, and yet he still seemingly has the patience to not make you know brash moves all the time. Although I'm not sure where I put this Duncan Keith thing
yeah,
in, but he's been at least a little bit what I would say patient. A lot of Oilers fans would say too patient.
yeah,
I want to see a team that is going to compete year over year with or without Connor McDavid, right?
yeah.
And so far, you know what we've had. I think it's because we've got Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, but we've had a couple of back-to-back playoff years. I would say that the team's done well, and I think a big problem is coaching. Is my personal opinion. But Jonathan Willis came out with a tweet that he really kind of solidified, like, to me, right? Like before this, I was kind of like this. I've been defending Holland for a while. I'm looking for the Jonathan Willis tweet, but he basically, let's say in a nutshell, right? Like he said, like you have to give Holland a little bit of a break initially, right? That he was what he was left with, right, from Chia,
Mm-hmm.
and and then you kind of like you can kind of give him that and say, okay, you're all right. But now you have to kind of say, okay, well, he's had that. And here's the tweet. I'll read it out loud. He says, the Duncan Keith trade is the tipping point. We're no longer really allowed to talk about Ken Holland's hands being tied financially by Peter Chiarelli. Keith and Cassian combined for $9.1 million in cap space, and both were Holland decisions. He had money. This is how he used it. So thoughts on that?
Yeah,
That's a
I
long
have.
lead up to that, by the way. But yeah,
That's my biggest concern with Holland is him in the cap era. He doesn't have the best track record, and it's still showing that he may not be the best one at cap management. So that's my biggest concern with Holland.
See, your little one agrees too.
Yeah,
Got the same feeling there. On yeah, okay. So I mean, there's now if you're let's talk about the Oilers in the upcoming draft then, right? I mean, we know now we've got Keith for a couple of years. We've got we've got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins obviously tied in. We've got McDavid. We've got Draisaitl. If you were the Oilers and you were up there on the podium picking at 19 this year, first off, would you do anything with the pick, like trade up, trade down? What's your thoughts in terms of what the Oilers need? And
I wouldn't trade up in this draft. I just think there's going to be a guy on your list that's going to fall to you. The draft is like all over the place, so I think there's going to be somebody there that you really like at that spot. So I wouldn't trade up. I definitely wouldn't. I'd trade down in this draft, if anything, if you can pick up some assets. It's the kind of draft to do it in. Whether anybody's willing to move and things is going to be interesting, just because of those factors. So I could see a lot of teams just sitting and waiting for their pick, knowing that they think their guy's going to fall to them. I know around that pick, like when I look at my list right now for guys in the, say, like 13 to 23 range, out of them, I have 10 forwards and a goalie. So it's
now,
likely,
what's your number? Because you only have where do you have any idea of where you'd put goalies in terms of your ranking? Like I know that's not your real thing, but you got forwards and D-men. I mean,
yeah.
Like does Bader have anything in terms of where he values goalies comparatively?
I don't know about that. I know he's come up with a methodology of how to rank them, or what like likelihood of making the NHL kind of thing.
Yeah.
Typically, a lot of years, I don't see a goalie in my top 2 rounds. Typically,
yeah. It's so hard to draft goaltenders, right? I mean,
usually like mid third that they start seeing them kind of show up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the interesting thing, right? So I mean, based on what you're saying in terms of, in that range, you're talking forwards who have a higher value for you, right?
Yeah.
And then you're talking a goalie, which is really a relative unknown, right? Like whether what that value. Well, to you anyway. I don't know. I'm sure they've got some kind of ranking on where they view that, but there are definitely 2 camps in the Oilers world right now. There's the folks that really love Casa because, well, I think there's a little bit of a hometown thing there. I mean, he was born in Hamilton, but I think he grew up playing in Fort Saskatchewan or maybe Sherwood Park or someplace just outside of Edmonton. And then, of course, he's playing for the Oil Kings, so that's a big deal. But then, if I go based on kind of your value chart, I mean, it seems almost silly to take a goalie in the first round. Of course, you don't have any numbers for goaltenders, but it just a goalie in the first round just doesn't seem right.
So I have him at 19. So like to me, that'd be the worst case. Like if I was using my list, that'd be my worst case scenario would be to get him. Mainly, if I was drafting, the Oilers would end up with a forward of some type, somebody that hopefully has top 6 forward potential.
Yeah. So who would you have in that, let's say, 12 to 17 range? Do you have maybe list off a couple names there? One of the names that you were talking about, the Oil Night, he's actually done, for those of you in advance of next week's show, you check out the oilnight.ca, and he's actually done a draft preview for the Oilers. He did it just over a week ago. And so he's got a couple of names on there as well that he kind of likes.
Yeah. Like there's guys like one guy that probably won't be there is somebody like Fabian Lysell, who I have who's lower on mine because his production wasn't as high, but he's somebody he looks better than the results kind of thing. So I know he's been compared, Low Tide's compared him to Hemsky, kind of, we're in that kind of flashy kind of forwards.
Oh yeah. I'll have to check. I haven't. I saw Low Tide put out a list early. I thought he was going to change it, so I haven't put a lot of effort into his list just yet. But has he released any new ones?
No, he hasn't released any.
Okay, so maybe I'm stuck with what he put out before. He was kind of like the first one to put out a list, really.
Yeah, it feels like Matthew Coronado. I got Logan Stankoven's high on my list, but he only played like 6 games in the WHL this year. So it's like, that's the problem with my draft model this year. So he got 7 goals in 6 games or something like that, or something.
How can you pick anything? How many of those goals were multi-goal games, right?
He's a really small guy. He's like 5'8" or something, but he's been compared to Brad Marchand, except without as dirty a player, but he's got that motor and skill kind of thing. And so he's one. There's a lot of forwards in that kind of range, and that's the problem with this year with my draft model. I I guess I have more doubts about it this year than others, just because of the small sample size with players.
Yeah,
you got guys playing 6 games instead of 72 and things like that. So I think my numbers are going to be skewed on some players. So it'll be interesting to see which one next year.
how it shakes out.
Shakes out,
Yeah. No, I mean that'll be. I mean, it'll be interesting, right? Like you could conceivably pick, a first overall that will never play, right? Could be, and through no fault of their own, be the biggest bust ever, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking of another Edmonton boy, Shizowski was picked second overall, and I think he played, a game or 2 games for the Islanders. That's going way back.
Yeah.
But some people would. And then actually, the reason I know Shizowski so well was his mom was my school secretary, or I guess administrator now is what. But at the time, they still went by the term secretary. But yeah, she was up front, and so it was kind of always this like little piece of trivia that her son was Shizowski, and he went second overall in the draft. I think he played 2 games for the Islanders before he.
And that's what I hope with this draft, is that GMs realize that this is a below average draft, and that's where you hear like Power going back to the NCAA, and they don't rush these guys and treat them more like a 4th or a 5th overall pick, and not as a first overall pick that you have to rush to the NHL.
Yeah. So here, because you said in the cap era, Ken Holland has had, pretty poor numbers, or results, right? Yeah. Are there any sort of redeeming qualities for Holland? And are you in the camp of like, if you could replace Holland with another GM, you'd do it, or you still want to see where it goes? So that's a 2-parter, but
yeah.
So first is let's ask the Holland question first. Would you replace him if you could, and then second, what kind of good things do you see out of Ken Holland?
I guess you could replace him. I don't have an option of or knowledge of who I would replace him with. So
that's always the challenge, right? Yeah. As Oilers fans, we always want everybody's head, but we don't know what we'd do if we had the chance.
Yeah. So. I would like somebody that's a little more aggressive with cap management and things like that nature, and maybe more then it's this weird dynamic between the GMs where they really are scared of pissing each other off, or you hear Ken Holland talk about that with Bowman, well, he won't do a deal with me and stuff if I screw him over kind of thing. But you see that all the time in the NHL, that they're a little afraid to really be vicious with each other, the GMs, which is
well, it's a small fraternity of guys, right? It's not, there's now there'd be 31 other GMs that you have to deal with. It's not like you can go out and just pick and choose who you're going to deal with. It's a small market, right? Of people you've got to negotiate with. So I think I think Burke, I've heard Burke say it best. It's kind of he always tried to make it a win-win in every situation, because he didn't know when, and of course he was one that had his enemies, right? Right. The guys he wouldn't deal with, Kevin Lowe. Yeah.
So. Yeah, there's that. But yeah, I don't have a good option out there. I'm not knowledgeable enough to know I had to replace him with this guy. So
yeah.
But yeah, I know. Yeah, you mentioned coaching. I know you mentioned with Tippett there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Maybe that's I didn't like how he coached in the playoffs. I'll say that with Tippett.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here, there's Eric Friesen, who I have on the show, and is going to be on the show in a few weeks. And he does a podcast on the Oilerslive Channel called 99 Forever. He and I got into it on the pod. Not got into it. I wouldn't say we're both pretty civil, but talking about he says, look, Tippett's brought us, to the postseason a couple seasons in a row, and at first I was kind of buying into that, and then I started to think about it. I mean, you've got Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. That should be at the very minimum of success criteria, right? It shouldn't even be a question mark as to postseason. right? Like that,
Yeah.
you and I should be able to coach the Oilers with Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid into a playoff round, right? And then that's when the real coaching begins in my mind, right? Like that's when they separate like the good coaches from the bad coaches, and we've seen that year over year, right? With with the coaches that are successful. I'm thinking of Trotz, right? Like Coach Q, who's had a lot of postseason success. Maybe not this year, but
Yeah.
those guys seem to do it, and we haven't seen. I think Tippett's got like a really ridiculously low winning percentage when it comes to playoffs. That's prior to being in Edmonton.
Yeah. Well, from watching, it seemed like he was desperate the way he was coaching, and the way he was like playing with 4 defensemen, things like that. The way he was shortening his bench a lot. It's just it seems like he doesn't trust a lot of his players.
Yeah, no, well, exactly. And so, I was thinking this as we were talking earlier, and we go back to this Duncan Keith trade. Like, Holland's got to listen to a number of different folks before he makes a trade like that, I think, right? Like, I don't think you get on the phone and make a trade like that just without consulting your all-star in Connor McDavid. I think there's probably a phone call in there, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's done. But I also think you consult your coach, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all know Caleb Jones seemed dead in the water with Tippett. Despite what, I haven't seen anybody trash Caleb Jones play other than Tippett didn't come out and trash him, but certainly showed him that he didn't value his efforts by not playing him, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it seemed like Jones was too risky for Tippett's liking. Makes too many high risk plays out there.
Yeah. So that's all in all. Good on Caleb Jones for getting a new opportunity someplace else to. Like, I think under Tippett, he's certainly in trouble. Obviously, Chicago, right? Like, if they there's some chatter that they're working on a Seth Jones trade, but if Elliot Friedman, who seems to be one of the most connected guys in hockey, says DeBrincat or Boakvist are the ask for Seth Jones. Yeah. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. Let's talk about before we go. We got about 5 minutes left. Oh, maybe I should ask you anything that we haven't covered today that on your mind is sort of yell from the rooftops, Oilers related sort of stuff before.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, because that's an honest question with this team. You just never know, right? What's coming up. What do you think of the RNH trade, by the way, or not trade, signing? Numbers.
No, I like
everything.
Yeah, the numbers are good. Yeah. Again, like over the course of it, the last couple of years will be a little expensive, but I think he'll cover it overall, the bet. And even though he had like lower even strength numbers, like his first assist totals were way down this year, Nuge, but the analytic, he still had strong analytic numbers though. So I'm expecting a bounce back next year with that. It just seemed like a weird one-off, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. So. He brings so much more than just points, right? He's, he's versatile. There's not many players in the league that can play up and down the lineup like he can. Right. Yeah. And in any situation, PK, power play. Yeah. The only thing he doesn't do, and I think he made a nice save this year too, but he doesn't typically play goal. But he's, there's more. There's so much to that guy, and let's be honest. For years we've been complaining about players not wanting to play in Edmonton. It's nice to have a guy that wants to finish his career seemingly in Edmonton, right?
He wants to finish, and he wants to win here. Is what he.
Yeah, it'd be good. It'd be good. What? Yeah, because hopefully maybe I can get you back on again. But so far, where do you think this Oilers franchise is going? What are your thoughts for the upcoming season?
I'm interested to see what they end up doing with the wingers. That's going to be the big thing this year is what they do in free agency or trades to kind of strengthen that. Our depth. They finally got some money to improve the forwards. Our forward depth is still an issue with this team. It's still got to be fixed up. So there's that, and then the key thing's kind of unknown. It'll be interesting. I imagine there's going to be a Clefbaum announcement sometime in the summer.
Yeah, you got to think this Duncan Keith thing has something to do with that, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you this. 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, probably going on 4, I started the podcast, and I had Jason Strudwick on. And Jason, actually, he and I went to high school together. Sat, I can't remember. He sat behind me or I sat behind him in English class. At the time, of course, I had no idea he would be an NHL player, but so he was, gracious enough to make an appearance on here. And I remember he totally burst my bubble that year and said defense was a huge problem for us, and it stuck with me for a couple years. And now, the fact that we can trade Caleb Jones away and not, think we're trading away the future of our defensive core is actually not such a bad situation to be in, right?
And hopefully Larson's been trending in the right way if they do re-sign him. So it'll be interesting.
We've got 2 minutes. Who do you think Seattle will take from the Oilers? If assuming no trades or anything go.
I guess Benson's the one that comes to mind off the top of my head. You want them to take somebody like Cassian or somebody else, but we'll see.
We wouldn't be so lucky. maybe some favors or something. I don't know.
I hope they don't. For all I know, they'll protect Cassian.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
We'll see what who Seattle picks. Okay, so tell everybody a little bit about where they find you, what they can expect next before we shut her down for the night.
You can find me on the bluebulletreport.com for my work. Rankings will be out next week. And you can also find me on Twitter, bluebullet1981. And those are the main 2 places you can find me.
All right, excellent. And for those of you still listening, it was actually a pretty good live audience today. I will release this as a podcast, which is what I always do. Really, thank you so much for joining me today, Brad. It was as you come.